Hello and welcome to Clog Builder 2.0 Masterclasses. Today we're going to be talking about Tutorial 2, of course, the system browser, the console, and the REPL. We'll talk about that in a moment. I would also like to humbly ask for all those that can, consider supporting Clog. That basically github.com sponsors Rabbi Botten. And of course, I'll make a special mention for sure, Ultralisp, which is a tremendous asset to the entire community. Ultralisp.com. If you go there, there's also the ability to be able to sponsor as well. And hopefully I'll mention some of the great projects that make Clog possible. Certainly it's my work, but also the work of them and what they do make everything really possible for these types of works to exist for the Lisp community. So beginning our second class, the Clog framework tutorial. This is going to be talking about, like I mentioned, system browser, console, and REPL. And when I say REPL here, I actually mean the clog-builder-repl, as well as clog-repl and clog-builder-repl. We'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so first we're going to do is go ahead and we're going to load up Tutorial 2. There now is under the help, there's Tutorials Dir, and that will actually bring you to the directory with all the files we need. Let's go ahead now and open up a builder-repl. And let's go ahead and let's run our tutorial so we can take a quick look at it in action before we start discussing it. Tutorial 2, right? And boom. Okay, so click once, click twice, click 3 times, click 4 times. Super nice. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Very simple example. And let's go back to our code and let's take a quick look at that. All right. Okay, so basically we define our package, clog tutorial 2, and we say we're using common Lisp language, and we're going to be using clog, and we're exporting our start tutorial. We've done this already a couple times. We won't be going all through the details every single class, but for this one we will. We're now basically saying that the rest of the file will be read into the package clog tutorial 2. All right, so as you recall, our initialize of on new window, it basically says this is the function that's going to run every time we go ahead and we reset the browser or actually browse that location. And you'll notice, by the way, again, the actual number of the port changes, right? And that's because I'm using a compiled version, or as opposed to, for example, like if we run from the actual, from an Emacs version, you'll actually see 8080. That's the default. But again, in this regard, if you actually at any time initialize and you put here :port 0, it actually will pick a random open port on your particular machine. That's just a really nice little feature to know about. Okay. Anyways, goes ahead, we do initialize, we say on new window, and that's now our function. And that's what we'll be basically looking at. So first thing we'll discuss about is the idea that the body, so essentially when the browser goes ahead and opens up a particular file, right, or let's get browses that particular location, and one of the things it does is again, is it passes to our function a body which is a clog object representing the entire body of the page. And we go ahead and let's say we set the title. So the title, of course, is not on the body, but it's actually on the document. So we use HTML document, right, which is basically a function on body that gives us back the document object. And then we say, hey, I'd like to get the title on that document object, right, and I want to set it to tutorial 2. So we go ahead and do that, and that basically that's where we go ahead and set the title on the document to tutorial 2. Right? Again, there are some other functions like that. HTML document, window, location, navigator. All those things are similar to the same name. Well, except for HTML document. Actually, document is a name in HTML in general in the regular DOM. Window, location, navigator. Again, these are all the various different same objects on the DOM. They basically in Clog they actually have their corresponding objects in Clog itself. Again, remember, if you don't know too much about web programming in general or HTML in general, you're perfectly fine with Clog. As we go further along, we'll be doing less and less discussion of things that are directly looking and feeling webby, but in the beginning we'll start with that because the web is only the beginning. So this is a good place for us to start looking into one of our tools that I mentioned, the system browser. Now, I can either hit the browse button here, or I can hit alternate and period. Either way, that will bring up a system browser. Now, the system browser will look through the entire Lisp image, and it will search basically for whatever I have over here. So in this case, we grabbed right out of the source file the word title, and we search for it. Now, I can be more specific, and I say, well, I want to find title within clog, right? So that will, of course, limit things much more. And then basically based on here, well, there's a title method right over here, right? And that's in clog web. There's also a title in this other, let's see here, set of title also in the clog document. Oh, that's exactly what we wanted. So let's go ahead and grab that. And if you notice, by the way, so in addition to be able to find whatever documentation might be associated with it, the package is here. And this will go ahead and actually load the file in this window. We can actually edit it. You can even do the same kind of eval stuff we do on a source browser and save it, etc. Or we can actually just open up in a source browser, which you generally find a lot easier. And go ahead now and let's make it full size. So here we go. So this goes ahead and this would shoot out to the browser to change the title of the document on the document object. All right, so let's close this. And again, this is really a neat little tool because it basically lets you find really just about anything, any place. Let's say, for example, the clog tools. This is actually where all the clog builder itself is, right? And build a title class. Okay, boom. Well, there you go. Here's where we define basically what the titles look like, and blue-gray with round and everything. We can make changes here, save and all that kind of stuff. You can basically play with just about everything in your entire Lisp system directly from the system browser. A really, really cool tool. Okay, so before going on, I want to point out a couple of little things that are worthwhile knowing. And that is this bar here at the top. You saw it in the system browser. You see it here. And actually, you'll see it in a number of places throughout the clog builder. And that basically says when you evaluate something, this tells you where it will be evaluated, meaning in which package. So, of course, Clog Tutorial 2, that basically that's what it detects that this particular file wants to be executed or wants to be evaluated within that package. So the same sort of thing goes on here. So we do that. And if we change this, let's say, for example, we went ahead and changed this, then all of a sudden everything we evaluated would be as if it was a clog package. Well, if something specific to the Tutorial 2 package, it won't be found in the clog package, right? And it would actually create errors and so forth. Okay, then one more thing on the bottom here, right? So, for example, this bar here at the bottom, right? This is an information bar, but what that really does is pretty cool. See, select bindings body. It actually gives you information about every function that you work on. And even for that matter, there's not just autocomplete within the builder, but there also is this information about any functions which have previously been used. So, for example, let's say, or not previously part of the clog tutorials, part of the clog builder, or whatever packages that you have included in whatever packages here in the info bar. It basically will connect you to those packages as well. So let's say, for example, title we used before, right? So title says clog document. So that's how we knew, for example, to use the HTML document, right? And on the body, and that will give it now, right? That will tell us exactly what we need to fill in, and then we can go ahead and say whatever our new title is, right? And that's it. And we can just add whatever we want. So, for example, if we go ahead and evaluated this whole thing, right? And let's say we went ahead back to our REPL, and let's say we ran tutorial 2. Actually, we don't want to rerun tutorial 2 this time because we see what happened. We made a change, but we didn't save it to the file. If I saved it to the file, I could use that run function. So let's actually go ahead and let's bring that. Let's go ahead and say let's add it right here just for start tutorial, right? Butterfingers. Okay, start tutorial. Let's select that and evaluate selection, and there you go. Now you'll notice here it says new title, right? Because basically what I did was I actually used my source file as the actual almost like a REPL, right? And we'll see afterwards that there's actually a console where I could have actually done this, and it's actually used in a number of places within Clog's Builder. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But basically, I could have done the same thing here. I could have gone ahead and said, okay, let's say, for example, let's change our package to Clog Tutorial 2, And then we can go, that means then we go ahead now and say anything we execute in the console will actually be in that same package. So tutorial, okay. So let's say now we go ahead and evaluate all, and boom, there you go. Same, pretty cool, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and close that. All right, save file, no, and that's a nice little thing. If you've made any changes in the console itself, it will ask you to save it. If it just says output that you haven't touched, then it really won't bother you about saving when you go ahead to exit out of that. Okay, so again, going back to where we are. Okay, so we go ahead and we set the hello element to our function create section. Remember last time we used a create child and we fed it pure HTML. So now we're starting to use a little bit of the create functions that exist to parallel the DOM and within Clog itself. And they get less and less DOM oriented, more like a GUI builder type of, or GUI functions as you get further into Clog. But for right now, like I said, create section, and it's just going to be H1 section, hello world. So just really the same thing like we saw before, but in this case, more done in a more little lispy way. Now, basically, one of the nice little cool things you can do is you can actually set up closures around an actual handler. Now, this is a pretty cool thing, right? So within this particular handler, we actually use the closure, and then we're actually going to use the local variable x, so that every time I click, I am actually going to be modifying this particular local variable to the low element. So I can actually, let's say, for example, like I said before, let's go ahead and 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I can go ahead. Let's open up multiple windows of this, right? And you see, notice 1, 2, 3. They're not touching each other because each version, right, of the on new window creates a brand new version of this closure, right? Again, I realize that if you haven't used Lisp before, but this is one of the coolest parts of Common Lisp. If you take away closures and you take away, the ability to be able to pass around functions as actual objects in their system, I mean, you pretty much, at that point, just throw away Common Lisp. I mean, this is like the bread and butter of what makes this so incredibly cool. Okay, granted, there's a lot of other tools and things that make Common Lisp amazing, but this is one of those types of things. Okay, anyways, like I said, here we go ahead, we set up our function, hello element. That's going to basically, our hello element is going to get our function, in this case an anonymous function, and there's ways, for example, to actually have a whole library of different things you like to do with clicks, right, and keep them around, because since the actual anonymous function is passed a clog object every single time it's clicked, so this way it's going to be, we can have like 5 different objects on the screen, and when you click any one of those, you will tell which object based on what's here, or you can, like I said, just use anything within the actual function above as well, because they're all in the same, available namespace. Okay, so we go ahead, set on click, that's our handler. This is the object that we're going to be placing our function handler on, hello element. And we're not going to be actually using this object here at all, so we're not going to worry about it. Because as an example here, again, I used create child and I want to place it on the body, meaning I don't want this clicked 1, 2, 3 to become part of the button text. I mean, to continue to export the H1 and continue to expand that. I wanted to essentially add it to the body. So that's why we're using body here as opposed to using the object, which would have been the actual target, which is, in this particular case, the actual hello element, which is our section that we don't want. Okay. So either way, let's continue. Basically, we're going to increase the local x of our closure, and each time we click, we're going to do it this many times. Again, with the value of n, meaning it's going to be that value. So there we go, clicked 8 times, and therefore, again, you click the first time 1, second time 2, and so forth, right? And here we use a function scroll to, right? And we say we want to scroll the whole body, and we want the window of the whole body, right? So that's why we're going to be moving that. And we want to scroll to the 0 point all the way on the left. And height body is how far we want to scroll, which is going to be the full length of the document. the body itself, which is the document, within that window, right? In this case, if we go ahead and remember a little, first of all, we can see what the information, right? Clog window XY, right? And we can actually go ahead here, scroll to, and use our alternate period or our browse button. And if we go, so for example here, so scroll to, and there we go, right? Our function, so pretty cool stuff we can do. Okay. There we go. All right. Fine. Okay. And that basically sums up to tutorial 2. So it's pretty straightforward, like I said. We're setting a title on the document of the body. We're going ahead and adding an element, in this case a create section, which creates a section element of type H1 with the content hello world, and is going to be placing that into the body. Each time is going to be placed automatically right after. This can be changed, and we'll see that. We'll play that thing. We'll play a little bit with that on the REPL in a moment. And then, of course, like I said, we can set up our handlers as we've seen before. Set on click, either the standard handlers or a custom one. Which if you look through the documentation, we'll talk about that and how you can fire off all kinds of custom things within JavaScript on a page that will then run a particular particular handler on your document and so forth. Sorry, your Lisp application. And those are all little advanced techniques we'll get to in time. And in the meantime, like I said, we go ahead and affect the closure, but we don't affect versions of it within the OnNew window. So we have two different versions of OnNew window running. Each time we're only affecting the local closure in each one of those two particular functions as they stand. Okay, so that basically takes care of this first section on tutorial 2. Okay, so let's go ahead now and there we go. Here we go. Let's go ahead now and let's talk a little bit about the clog-builder-repl and the console. Okay, so let's start. Let's go here, clog-repl. And it's a similar REPL, like I said, in other places like Emacs. It's a little less functional, admittedly, in terms of things like autocomplete and things like that. But again, you'll actually see that we have that in a moment. Let's say, for example, print hello, right? So two things happen, right? We have the actual REPL window, and the REPL window basically prints the result of the function, which in this case is hello. But the actual side effect of the function, which is the actual printing of hello, occurred here in the console. Now, the way I have it set and configured is I have Clog Builder configured so that the result goes in both places. It happens to be that it's quite possible to change that without any issue at all, and that is using some preferences that essentially say where I want things to go. So if I go here, my edit preferences, right? By the way, if you delete your preferences.lisp, it will always grab the baseline from the preferences.sample, and we'll use that as the baseline for what you can modify. And if you're updating all the time, and I hope you are, the Clog Builder, which is constantly changing, you might want to do that every once in a while, or at least see what new types of things can be configured, as I'm always constantly adding new and different things. Like I just thought about now, for example, when I do the result, I have an equal, less than sign with a little arrow like that, because it's a pretty standard approach in Lisp to refer to that as the result. But for example, on Emacs, you don't see that when you get the result, which is actually a little bit confusing. But I like it. I keep it, but I'm going to actually make it set so you can set what you want to be the REPL result version. But either way, let's go back to what I already have set in Clog Builder and working. So that therefore, first of all, number one, I say the REPL builder should use the console. If I go ahead here and I say, let's say nil, right? And let's go ahead and evaluate that. Okay, so now what happens if I do the same print function, it actually prints to the builder, right? As prints to the REPL in the Clog Builder REPL as opposed to on the console. Okay, so again, I find it, I like actually, even though it's more familiar to me because this is the way I have it in Emacs, but I actually like and find that this is a really great way to work with things. Now, also, I can say, do I want to open on start? When I open the REPL, automatically open the console? Okay. By the way, about that, the console, which is available as a menu option is something which we can at any point close, and that actually erases the console, and you can build up, then open another console empty and deal with it. You can save it, of course, whatever the contents are, but just so you know that the console is not a permanent space. It's sort of a scratch pad, you might say. And the reason why I say it's a scratch pad is because you can actually use it really as the actual REPL itself in many ways, right? So, for example, let's say I print test, I can do event form, and boom, there you go, right? And I can go ahead and reuse it again and again. I don't have the keyboard up and down, but I could do a whole Emaxian type of thing where I go up to where it is, and I can then do that. So like I said, I find it actually many times I find it more functional for me to work actually within the console itself than this little REPL that's here. But either way, both work and both have their place, and like I said, the way they work. And then let's see, send result to console. So what happens is I can go ahead and I can change that as well. So in this case, let's say nil. Let's go ahead and evaluate that as well. Oh, by the way, there is actually a keyboard shortcut for evaluation I could be using as well, just so you know. And that basically is going to be, in other words, the big alternate or command if you're on the Mac, and the left square bracket. So that would also work as well, but I find it convenient just to use buttons and a mouse often. Although I generally, when I'm using Emacs, I'm all keyboard, but they all have their place. All right, so going back here, send result to come to the console. I said no. So, for example, if I go ahead now and I print hello, again, you notice the equal less than sign is not there anymore. Right? So that kind of deal. Okay, so, but either way, let's go ahead and let's close this. Save file though, because I don't want to change what we've done. Actually, I can go ahead and I can do evaluate all. If I want to go back to my regular normal functionality, no. Okay, so that basically is in a nutshell, sort of using the REPL and the connection with the console, and the fact that I could use the console as well. But there's some pretty cool stuff though with the REPL, and that's within the builder. I mean, of course, using the Emacs version, clog-repl, everybody's familiar with. I'm sure you are if you've played with this. This is the master class. I assume you've looked at some of the basic stuffs on your own. But that will actually open up a brand new REPL window. When I say REPL window, graphic REPL window, so that we can actually do all kinds of neat little things graphic-wise here. And let's say, let's go ahead. Ooh, come on, how come it's not doing? Okay, let's go ahead now. There we go. No, come on, give me this. There we go. 1, 2. Okay. So now, for example, I can go ahead and let's say create div star body. Let's see, contents. All of the clog create functions can accept a content, which basically is the text or the value on the HTML side. Content, sorry. Hello world. And boom, there we go. By the way, one of the advantages, of course, of doing this in here is I can basically, use the autocomplete and things like that. So it's like I said, it's a very, very, there's a lot to be said about using the console itself as your REPL. Hello again. Evaluate form. Oop, what happened here? Body's external, not external. What happened here? That's weird. I'm not really quite sure why. It is external. Well, okay, whatever case might be. Clog user, anyway, just for the sake of argument for today. That's kind of weird. I actually corrected that before. Well, okay, so we'll do it here for now. I assure you in the future when you try this out, it'll work for you. Okay, so that's one really cool way to be able to make use of the REPL where you're using a clog-repl window. But there is another really cool feature which is basically, in addition to using clog-repl, I can actually go like this, clog-builder-repl. All right, and that will actually open up a window here, and I can do the same sort of things that I was doing there. I can now do over here. So if I now do the hello world, right, then it goes on my builder-repl window over here as opposed to on a separate window outside. Now, you might say to yourself, well, why do you care about having a window in a window and all these sorts of things? One of the really neat things about Clog that people may not be paying attention to is that everything is basically can work over the web as well. So here's a really cool thing. Imagine you have a website, right? And that website is basically, let's on a server. Let's go our Clog Power website. Okay, and let's go ahead and let's say we want to go ahead and let's say go to comma list clog, right? And let's go ahead and let's say we want to run the builder there. Okay, so what happens is I've actually, it's going to go compile it, right? And at this point, I'm actually able now, there, of course, nothing's going to be popping on a server, so there's not going to be a web browser there. However, though, I am able now to go back to my browser, right? And I can feed in my correct IP address, or in this case, let's say clogpower.com, right? And guess what? I'm actually running, right? That's weird. Why it went to 150%, I don't know, but okay. But now, I know why, because I grabbed the picture from the website, so Google remembered that I used 150%. But anyways, by the way, that's another really cool feature, by the way. Shift Control plus and minus, you actually can change the size of your entire Clog Builder project and what you're working on, and you actually can expand or minimize the amount of space you have to work with. That's a pretty nice little cool feature that you actually have for the console anyways. So this is a console feature that exists within the builder. Okay, well, not the builder, within the particular browser that I'm using. Okay, anyways, but what happens is I'm actually using the builder, and you'll see it's not as smooth because this particular server is in the middle of nowhere compared to me, and I've got a bunch of hops. But what happens is that actually writing software or programming using this is actually pretty fluid, because remember, most of the functionality is actually occurring on the browser side, not on the connective side. But when you're doing, for example, GUI moves, you actually are passing back tons and tons of data back and forth. Now, it happens to be, by the way, there's a client-side movement version that you can actually set. I'm not going to go into all the details of that in this particular video, but you can actually set a client-side movement version, and then the actual movements and everything that's done here will actually be on the client side, and everything goes buttery smooth, even though you're working on a remote terminal. So in this case, I'm actually connected to that site. And again, I popped a hole here temporarily. Well, if I go back and I stop the server, it's gone, and that's it. So you don't worry about security stuff. Well, you maybe have security stuff at this moment. So if you want to maybe do it with an SSH, port and so forth and all that kind of stuff. But again, for our example, I'm not really worried about it. And again, it'll be gone in a second. And the next time I run the builder, it'll be a totally different port anyway. So you can try that port all day long. You'll probably never get me again. Plus, I also don't really work on that server very much. Okay, anyways. The point is this is a really amazing way, because I now have access to everything. For example, all my projects on that server. Again, this is my machine here, right? If I go ahead to the project file, I've got my projects that are here, right? But these are totally different. This is actually local to that machine, and I have access to all the files and everything else I want. In theory, if I can use the REPL to actually execute all kinds of stuff on there and everything else. So it's certainly a security risk to let this publicly be available, but to use as needed through proxying through SSH or as a quickie like this, it's just a really cool way, to be able to encounter and use all these sorts of cool code over the web. Close encounters. You remember that's from the tutorials that were written. They make a little tiny game, right? And again, I have full access here. And again, this is of course to be buttery smooth because now everything was loaded into the ACE editor, which is behind the editor that Clog Builder is using. So basically, I can do all the same sorts of things that I would do any place else, and and have access to whatever I'm doing and so forth. Okay. Anyways, it's really just a little cool feature that is really neat to have. Let's actually go ahead and close that security hole, which of course happens automatically since I'm running the builder. When the last builder window closes, so does my connection to the builder, and the builder shuts down. So that port is gone, washed away. Okay, let's go ahead and exit that server. Okay, so again, that's another really cool little functionality that's there. And let's see, did we cover everything I meant to cover? Yes, I believe we did in this. Okay, and like I said, read through, of course, all the text within the tutorial. We've talked about the tutorial itself. We talked about the different options that for the clog-repl, and the way it works with the console, using the console as the actual repl. Again, we'll have to figure out why that error was there. It shouldn't have been, because StartBuddy is definitely it is external and part of that. Oh, I know why. I think about it. Don't worry, I'll fix it by the time you get. It'll probably be hitting again, Ultralisp again. Listen, gotta donate to this guy because I'm hitting his server constantly. I do sponsor, but you'll be helping him as well. Okay, that's everything. Next class, some really cool stuff. And it's funny because most people would think in anything you teach today, just like the old days, I believe that a lot of packages were not usually taught from the beginning. I think it's the first thing they have to teach somebody about when it comes to using Common Lisp. And that's towards the end of almost every book. That's what, like I said, should be in the very beginning. Well, the same sort of thing, right? When it comes to all programming in general, but specifically when you're using Clog, when you're using today, when you're using Common Lisp, is to teach about parallelism and the idea of using threads and all that sort of nice, cool stuff. And we'll talk about that in the next class, actually, using Tutorial 3, where we already start playing around with the fact that parallel GUI is what Clog is. It's not your old Windows-based GUI or anything else. There are ways to emulate the standard approach where everything is done sequentially, but actually in Clog, everything is always done in parallel, which is a pretty cool idea, and we'll talk about that next class. All right, thank you very much.